title screen.
Look at our 3 main heroes. They're looking snazzy.
Alchemy.
Bump.
The law of equivalent exchange. We're on the title screen because, first of all, it's cool.
Yeah.
Our protagonists.
Protagonists. Here they be.
And also because we have to talk about what happened last time. And
Oh, yeah.
oh, see, I knew this was going to happen. This is the problem, is I can't keep this anymore without loading it. When I load it, it's going to start. So I have to go into the load menu. It's going to be boring. So you know what? Fuck it. Fuck the music. There you go.
Whoa!
Music's gone.
Ah, okay. Let me just back that up.
We're just
going
to talk about what happened.
Okay.
That's going to be today's video. Because I didn't get to do one for Tuesday. Things have been really busy. I'm down on a reporter, hiring another position, COVID, blah, 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 blah. Excuses, nobody cares. So what we're going to do is talk about what just happened at the end of that particular arc, and then we'll jump back into the gameplay. That'll be Thursday, Friday, and then hopefully I won't be feeling the effects of Shot 2 so badly that I don't want to record this weekend. We'll see.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds good.
a lot just happened. We knew from the beginning that Oliver was coming back. Okay, we've said it 100 times. I'm not even going to exactly claim a lot of credit for that because it was fairly obvious, okay? So let's just get that out of the way up front.
Yeah.
That said, and I mentioned this in the comments talking about this part with a couple people, it was, god damn it, fucking work email. It was better done than I expected it to be. And I thought it was going to be good, but the reveal of him coming back, while not shocking, was still a really, really well-played moment. It's Oliver at his peak because he's doing it with the most effect possible. So he's,
lots of flourish.
Yeah, extravagant. And so that's just, vintage Oliver. But I was pretty pleased with it. You can quibble with a few things like we could with anything. But overall, it's like we finally arrived. We got all the fluffy stuff out of the way, and now it's real.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that things picked up a bit. I was feeling sort of like, okay, the last 8 or so hours were kind of meh, but then it picked up and I was like, this is better. This is why we play these games, for these, cool character crossovers and all these interactions. And even just going around and talking with everyone was really fun. Even though there was like a ton to get through, it was like, I want to see all the things these characters have to talk about.
And they kept switching up the groups, which was a little off-putting from a player perspective, but it made sense because they wanted to do multiple scenes with different interactions between a whole bunch of different groups of characters. Almost all of those were good.
Mm-hmm.
And even the ones that were so-so, I wasn't like against. I was just kind of like, I don't really like this pairing, or okay, yes, Angelica likes little girls, fantastic. Like,
Yeah, there were a couple where I was like, I don't really need this in my life, but like Joshua and Ash was good.
It's frustrating, even on the Angelica example, because like, if you like Angelica or you like Angelica's style of character, you would expect to have that payoff with all these characters on this ship. So while I don't personally care for that aspect of her, I can see why they put that in there, because it's like, okay, well now there's like these 3 Supergirls all on one ship. So of course Angelica has to run to them at some point. Like, if not, what are we doing? But I was glad when it was over. So.
Also, I was like, it's good we're getting this out of the way.
And the game at this point is even starting to take shots at it. They're like, okay, Angelica, like, don't have a heart attack.
Which is nice.
But if that was the worst of the scenes, which was still fine, then, no problem. Because there's a lot of really good ones. We had our long-awaited Hamel reunion, which was one of the better ones, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think that one might have been my favorite of the bunch. I
think it's up there, because you knew it was coming. And they even alluded to, like, well, we'll have to do that later when we have more time. The last time they crossed over, and they had a little bit more time now.
Yeah.
Were there any other ones that stood out? I mean, I thought, so I don't put you in the spot, you can think. I thought a couple for me were obviously like, I mean, Rean Cassius has to be high up on the list just because of what it represents. Cassius being the huge player that he is, but also the same practitioner of the sword style. We don't have a lot of chance to really talk about 8 Blades, 1 Leaf, which is what I'm going to call it now. It comes up frequently, but we never see Master Cafe. He's just
we finally got some artwork for him, which I think is new.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. Somebody in the comments mentioned he could be this old man that's coming up in the Calvert games.
I saw that. Yeah,
be around the right age. I'd be surprised if they went that route, but hey, I mean, it's possible.
He just seems he's mentioned so often in the games that it is a little surprising that he hasn't showed up yet.
Yeah,
So
the longer they put this off, the more the reveal has to be perfect. And, I mean, again, they just showed with this Oliver thing that they can definitely pull that off, but you can't half-ass him showing up. Like, if you're gonna build him for an entire 4-game series and or more, if that includes Hajimari, he might even be mentioned before that. I'm not positive. Obviously, we haven't played the Crossbell games. I don't remember him coming up in Sky, but at the time, the name would have meant nothing to me. So it's possible he did. I don't remember. Also, this background is bright, and it's reflecting off my glasses, and it needs to change.
Yes.
Better.
Good.
Any other scenes that stuck out?
I'm trying to think if there were. I don't think there were any, like, huge ones. I thought, generally they were all pretty solid, and I think at this point, I haven't been loving the direction of the story necessarily, so I've been a lot more invested in, like, the characters and what they're doing, so I thought all the scenes were solid from that perspective. Like, look at all these cool character moments we're getting. So,
yeah, I mean, that's definitely the payoff for all the investment in the series as a whole is these type of interactions. And Tales as a series also relied on that quite a bit, where it's like the story is okay. Trails' story is a lot better than Tales. But in general, I was there for the characters, their development, their interactions. So I'm with you there. Like, it would have been nice if they could have voiced that whole segment. I understand why they couldn't. That's a massive undertaking. That's not something I'll be critical of.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
Even just reading it because they're so interesting, that was still fine. Like that's pie in the sky stuff where that would have been cool, but I don't hold it against the game at all.
God, I hadn't even thought about that. I think I've just gotten so used to so many scenes not being voiced that it's almost like, am I surprised that it wasn't voiced?
Yeah.
I mean, some of those probably should have been, but I think they got like the big ones. So
the critical stuff, especially when they actually unrolled Operation Mil Mirage, was that was all there, and you had pretty much everybody in the room get to have a line or two at some point. So they covered their bases well enough.
Yeah.
I will say, in regards to the pacing, I think it's both good and bad that this was immediately preceded by the section that we've already run into the ground and that other people have in the comments as well, which is like the perhaps worst part of any of these 4 games, followed by one of the better.
It was definitely weird. The pacing leading up to this, it was just so boring before. And then it like ramps up to this cool stuff, and you're like, "That's neat. Could we have had something cool before this to balance it out a little bit?"
And like, what a strange thing, because in contrast, it makes this section look even more important in a way, because you're like, yes, like the breath of fresh air, important things are happening. And then you look backwards, and you're like, we just did all this stuff with all these characters, and literally like 4 hours ago, we were doing this dumb shit.
Right. And, I was thinking about it, too, like the Operation Leaves and why I thought, Operation Trista was so much better. And you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong about the second game. But I thought the way I'm remembering it in 2 is that we go in and save Trista like the day before we go into the final dungeon. So it's like the perfect calm before the storm. And it makes sense because Trista's like right next to Heimdall. So it's like a strategic thing. Am I remembering that right?
Well, yeah, and you also had to have like a free time then too, where you got to wander around the area once you retook it and kind of reconnect with stuff. Whereas here, you liberate Leaves and then you leave.
Like for no reason. Yeah, like why did it happen right there? If we were just going to leave anyway, we could have done it at any point. And it just didn't have the same payoff. I think it was just so similar to 2. And it was like, well, I liked it better in 2. I liked Trista better. I mean, I guess the branch campus characters are better because they're not so weird in comparison to some of the Thor's kids. But
we have some weird ones in the branch, but you're right. There are some doozies in that original group. One of which I was happy to see, which was Vivi. A handful of which. It's good to see a number of people that showed up again. We hadn't really seen Mint in this game.
As long as she doesn't speak, we're good.
Yeah, if she just exists and doesn't open her mouth, we're going to be in really good shape.
She can be standing in the corner, and that's fine. But anything else, I have
Go work with Valimar. He hasn't been talking a lot this game. Maybe you can.
No,
maybe
it's
you can
true.
fix that.
He hasn't.
But this section, very solid. If I'm going to critique anything, then what the hell, right? Like it's only fair to at least talk about a few things. This is something that I have mentioned in an exchange with a couple different people as well, but I am a little bit over the JRPG trope of friends with enemies.
Yeah, I saw those comments and I was like, that's a really good point that I once I read the comment, I was like, oh yeah, that's like a thing in a lot of JRPGs, and it is kind of run into the ground now, isn't it?
In the first 3 games of Trails of Cold Steel, you could argue that it was fine, especially as much as they do to build up all these characters. In the first game, the stakes aren't that high. So, if you're having squabbles with your other classes in the school or something, it's pretty easy to overcome those and then find a common ground. And, like, while C is an enemy, we obviously know the ties to him that make that impossible to have him be a full-blown enemy.
Yeah.
In 2, the Civil War clearly has a lot of people a little bit conflicted on what side they fall on. So it's not hard, again, to have these conversations where you're like, well, we're on different sides of the battlefield right now, but, like, I respect you. I certainly wouldn't try to kill you. Like, those make sense. In 3, the stakes shrink back down a little bit till the very end when they skyrocket.
Just completely.
And we don't really have any of those conversations after that point. We head into that whole stretch, and then at that point, people were on different sides.
Yeah.
The problem with this now is the stakes cannot be higher.
Yeah, there's like literally a continental war that's gonna happen at some point. And it's like, oh, but I'm so conflicted. And it's like, dude, we're on the brink of war right now. You like make up your mind. You're either with us or you're against us, and you just need to commit. Like, I do agree, it's a little silly at this stage of the story because the stakes are so high, and it's like, well, why are we having these conversations with people? It's just kind of takes away from some of those fights, like with Claire and Nightheart, and like they're not actually our enemies, and it's like, why are we fighting then? It's just like, ooh, I'm gonna train you and make sure that you're ready. It's like, that's silly.
It doesn't work, especially with Georg or George.
At first, I was like, who are you talking about? It
seems as though they're going to have him redeem himself as well. He probably had a part in how Oliver and Toval got out of there in the first place with the Courageous.
Yeah.
Maybe he faked the explosion or something. That seemed to be what they were suggesting. And Alberic was kind of like, we're going to talk about that a little more later. And you saw him like just ... But the reason this doesn't work for me is, I mentioned Vesperia in the comments, but for people who don't read those, that one was like, okay, Yuri and Duke are both trying to save the world. They're doing it in their own way, but they're not so diametrically opposed that you can't see some kind of path where it could work with both of them. And ultimately, when you beat him in the final battle, you sort of involve him in that process. Here, I guess you can argue that Osborn, who we're going to learn more about as we go down the stretch here, I'm sure, is doing what he thinks he has to save the world, but his methods are so unencroachable that I don't know how you could ever find a middle ground. So it's like, why are we having these conversations with this group when clearly the method you're going for is going to turn a bunch of people crazy and get them to kill each other? Again, we've talked death tolls in the hundreds of thousands to steal Milliam's line. So I don't know that I can afford to be chatty with you 6 days before we're all going to go to war and kill each other.
Yeah, it's like there's a disconnect between like the stakes and what the villains are doing, but then they're like, oh, well, we have to redeem them because of course. And then it's like they're not taking into account like, okay, well, these are all the actions they've taken. Here's all the shitty stuff they've done. And oh, we have to forgive them at the end? Like, okay.
The other issue is, what the hell? I'll just keep going back to Vesperia. It's one of my favorite JRPGs. You can have those ideological conversations with Duke because they exist in the first place. Before that battle, they're talking about how, we're not that different. If you could just come to this thing. And he's like, yeah, but I can't abide by this. So we maybe have to look at this. There's the point at which it's not going to happen because it's an RPG you need to build to a boss battle, right? Mm-hmm. But you can at least be like, yeah, like I don't really agree with him, but I see where he's coming from. We might get that yet with this other group here. Okay, it's still possible that comes up. As of right now, though, there isn't. That whole scene happened where it was just kind of like, oh, all these people have come together, right? And then there's a surprise entry from this side, and a surprise from this side, and a bunch from this side. None of them are trying to change each other's minds. They're all just kind of like checking in with each other because they haven't seen each other in a while. And it's like, right, oh, hey, how's it going? See you in 6 days when we have the war to end all wars. And you're like...
Right.
So I didn't hate any of that, to be very clear. All of it, again, I enjoyed quite a bit. I think we both did. Mm-hmm. But that's the one aspect where I'm kind of like,
Yeah, and like I think this series could do the philosophical conversations well. It just seems like sometimes the execution isn't quite there. to make that really work. Like, I think they would need to plant the seeds a lot sooner for some of this stuff. And also just get rid of the curse.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that ultimately plays out. But
God, I hate it so much. There's just so many cool things you could do without it, and that like I can already, like, you could do propaganda and like stuff like that to get people on your side for the war. You could lie about the emperor being assassinated by a Calvardian agent. They already kind of did that. So like, why do you need a curse to justify this? Like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of my whole dilemma.
That, and we're still not exactly sure what Musei has control over and doesn't with her ability to prognosticate.
Yeah, it's kind of bullshit. We have like 5 people who can do that in some form or another. Claire, Kia, Musei, and I'm just like, there's
maybe
too many.
Rufus.
Maybe Rufus, and just like, there's too many goddamn people who can like, I'm predicting the future because I'm so smart, and it's like, why isn't Musei just? Because I liked all this stuff with her being really tormented about this operation and the death toll it was going to have.
Yeah,
and
great development for her.
That was great. And it's like, just do more of that. I don't know why you need this like prediction thing. I don't know. Because then when she doesn't predict stuff, it's like really obvious.
Yeah, like us not joining the operation.
Exactly.
And
like
you can say, well, she predicted that and it had to play out this way to set the third group in motion, but she doesn't know Oliver's coming to present this third path, and she also should know, even before that happens, that these groups are not going to go along with that. Like, the impassioned speech that the 3 protagonists give in that moment should not come as a surprise to her.
Right. If she can predict everything so well, as the game seems to suggest, like that shouldn't have even been. I don't know. It's like sometimes it's hard to know like when she's actually predicting stuff, or if the game is just like, oh, she predicted something because we need it for the plot.
So I hope they do, like you mentioned, more developments with her, like in her actual like human struggles and the position she's been thrust into at such a young age.
I really like that stuff with her. I mean, her whole flirty thing is like meh, but like all that human stuff with her is really good, and I like it a lot. And I hope they do more of that. I don't know what it's going to look like now, obviously, but
I don't even mind the flirty stuff, especially as it becomes more clear that it's like deflecting. Like,
that's true.
Because she's got all this stuff on her shoulders, and she's just using this as a way to blow off steam, or as a way to like, not show her true feelings, etc. Given that additional context, as we learn more about her in this game, I become more and more okay with that, because I mean, hell, maybe she is serious, but overall, it's kind of like a coping mechanism almost.
I can see that.
So that's quibbling. And again, sort of like when we reviewed 3, it seems like, well, we just spent half the time talking about the bad. It's because the good is good. You guys know, like, scene was awesome overall. I don't need to talk about how, like, it was awesome seeing certain overlapping of characters that hadn't seen each other in a long time. Even some of, like, the Chloe and Lecter stuff. I was like, this is cool. Like, it's a little bit weird at this particular moment, but it almost had to be at this moment for them because they're on very different sides and they haven't been around.
Yeah.
So with them, I'm like, cool. The only other thing I'll say, one minor quibble. What the hell, right? It's quibbling.
Yeah, do it.
It just looks funny, maybe by design, that as everybody's on the Pantagruel, and then these discs start showing up so that the people who aren't there can communicate. So we have like the little face bubbles.
Yeah.
We still have all of our characters, all like 50 of them, on the deck of the Pantagruel, weapons drawn in their little idle poses, like, holding whatever weapon. Talking to these floating bubbles, so it's like, what are you gonna do? Attack them with a spear, a sword, and then the floating bubbles just keep popping up at the most convenient times for dramatic effect.
It was pretty funny, and they're all like different sizes, and yet they're all like looking at each other, like. Rufus will look over at Osborn, except like, how can he do that? Because he's in a bubble. It was kind of goofy.
It's done to give the story, dramatic effect and make a static scene more dynamic. So I don't have any qualms with it. It just looks weird, especially when they pan across and you see everybody and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna get this Osborn bubble." And you're like, "I don't think you are.
Show him who's boss."
I don't think you're magic, and even Vita, who's here, can't do that. So you probably can't." But like, really good. The boss sequence was fun. I had one bad group that I don't really like how I set it up, but that was partially my fault, and I don't mind the challenge spike. So,
was that the first group?
Yeah. And also, I didn't realize the map being the way it was, so like, Before I realized I was in a corner, I was in a corner.
Right, yeah. It just kind of... Well, they got like a bunch of turns when we started, so that wasn't even like fair.
Yeah, it was also our slowest group.
Yeah, so that was just not a good... That was going to be a tough battle no matter what. But we got through it. Lots of revives.
I do hope there is one more party split, maybe into 3s, because we have so many people in some final dungeon or some like down the stretch part, and that I have more say over who goes where.
I hope they don't do a weird like gender split. They've done that a couple times now, and I just think it's a little weird. Like, why don't we have the more freedom to choose who goes where? It doesn't matter, really. It shouldn't matter. If it's a 2, if we're going off in 2 paths anyway, I should be able to choose who goes to which side because it's not that different. So, yeah, I did think that was a little odd. So
I'm excited. I'm not going to make a ton of predictions for what's next. I'm hopeful that we're still going to have another like hour to 2 of scenes on the new Courageous as we go and talk to all the people we haven't seen and reunite characters that have been missing for a while and console Laura because her dad is a zombie with one arm.
Oh, yeah, that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the stupid mask. And he's like, but it's me. I have all my memories, except that I'm willingly doing this thing. And it's like, so then you don't have like a will of your own, even though you just said you did.
Oh, okay. So the guy you fought to the death and who scarred your lungs to the point where you're having a hard time staying alive, you're just going to align with him, and we're just expected to believe you when you say that, yeah, that's fine. This is what I actually wanted. This is my true will. You know what? Fuck my daughter. I don't care about her.
Exactly. Who cares about like my friends, Cassius and Oliver and everybody? I'm just going to be a villain now. Mm-hmm. I did think that was a little goofy. I don't even think it's... I mean, on one hand, I really hate the whole mind wiping thing, but it's happened so much at this point that... I don't know. I'm torn.
I don't mind it as a mechanic in general. I would be interested to learn more about this particular method because they mentioned that it kind of harkens back to something else we've seen. Something that Ouroboros used to do more of. So we'll see if that's what's at the works here and it's not just a mask like it was for Angie. My suspicion is it might be, but who knows? Who knows?
Hopefully it's something a little more interesting.
It's going to make for a hell of a fight. I don't know how that group breaks down. One assumes Laura has to be involved.
Yeah, probably. I would say she's probably locked in.
And kind of Rean, too. I mean, he's probably going to be with us no matter what. He's the main character, but he did have that fight with Victor back in 1. Mm-hmm. And it didn't go well for him.
No, it was bad, even with our ogre form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were in it the whole time, and he was toying with us. And he's only gotten stronger since then, so... Maybe they had to lose
But now
the arm.
he has, like, freaky zombie lungs, so maybe we have a shot.
Yeah, we'll just run away from him. What's he going to do,
and
catch
he only
us?
has one
arm. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. We're going to queue that up, and that'll be in Thursday's video next as far as what happens. That's my expectation, though, is there has to be a number of scenes still. I don't even mind. Like, pacing-wise, you might care about that normally, where it's like, oh, my God, like 4 hours of talking. But when it's this pivotal, I have no qualms with it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's tomorrow's video. Apologies for Tuesday, but, life's hard. So,
life is not fun.
Tomorrow, service resumes. Friday, a video as well. And hopefully just into next week, assuming the second shot doesn't knock me on my ass.
Which it might.
We'll see.
Yeah.